Good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Devashish Dubey, and I welcome you to the virtual hands-on session on reading images. We'll be discussing about fundus fluorescing angiography today. Now, there are the two terms that we need to be familiar with are luminescence and fluorescence. Luminescence is the emission of light from any source other than that at a high temperature. When light energy is absorbed into a luminescent material, free electrons are given into a higher energy state, and the energy is then re-emitted by spontaneous decay of electrons into their lower energy state. When this decay occurs in the visible spectrum, it is called luminescence. Fluorescence is a luminescence that is maintained only by continuous excitation. Autofluorescence is the emission of fluorescent light from ocular structures in the absence of sodium fluorescein. A few examples would be optic nerve head drusen and retinal astrotic hematoma. Here, this is a picture of a retinal astrotic hematoma where you can see these hyper autofluorescent mulberry-like lesions that are the astrotic hematomas. The fluorescein dye is an orange-red crystalline hydrocarbon with a low molecular weight. 80% of the dye is bound to plasma proteins and 20% is unbound. This unbound dye diffuses through most body fluids and the choriocapillaries. They do not diffuse through the retinal vascular endothelium or the RPE. They are metabolized in the liver and excreted by the kidneys. They are usually detected in the urine for around 24 to 48 hours. This is a picture. This is the choroidal capillary, which is fenestrated. Hence, the dye is able to extravasate out. The RPE and the retinal capillary have tight junctions. Hence, the dye is unable to extravasate out. The sodium fluorescein has excitation spectrum of 465 to 490, that is in the blue color range, and the emission spectrum is 520 to 530, that is green to yellow. This great spread between excitation and emission wavelength is clinically helpful as the separation in their separation by photographic filters during angiography. I'll explain it to you. Fundus camera has two filters. That is, one is excitation filters that allows only blue light to enter, and the barrier filters that allows only green fluorescent light to reach the camera sensors. In this photo, you can see this is the blue excitation filters, which obstructs all the light except the blue light which goes in, and it excites the fluorescein in the blood vessels. The yellow-green light is emitted along with the reflected blue light. The green filter blocks the blue light and only allows the green light to pass through, which is captured by the camera. Now, pseudofluorescence occurs usually when the both the barrier as well as the excitation filters are not aligned properly or they are overlapping each other. It usually occurs when non-fluorescent light passes through the entire filter system. So, if the green yellow light that penetrates the original blue filter, it will pass through the entire system and come out. Or if the blue light that is reflected from the non-fluorescent fundus structures, it penetrates the green yellow filter and comes out. These lead to the a fundus image, which is called as pseudofluorescence. Now, nausea being the most common side effect, and anaphylaxis is the most dreaded one. And the normal FFA usually we inject in the cubital vein. It gets transferred to the arterial system, where it through the intercarotid artery comes to the ophthalmic artery, then the short posterior ciliaries and the central retinal artery. There are 5 phases. One would be choroidal, then arterial, then arteriovenous, then venous, then late. These are timings of FFA phases. The arm to retina time is usually around 10 seconds, and the late phase, wherein the dye starts fading out of the ocular circulation, is around 15 seconds. Now, first is the choroidal flush. As I discussed, the arm to retina time in young people is around 10 to 12 seconds, and the old it is 12 to 15 seconds because of arteriosclerosis. This faint, irregular choroidal filling, this is the choroidal flush. There are scattered islands of delayed filling, which may be present even in normal individuals. Now, this is the ciliaretinal artery, which usually gets filled during the choroidal flush. This is because the ciliaretinal artery originates from the posterior short ciliary arteries. The arterial phase, it usually happens 1 to 3 seconds after the choroidal flush. The dye enters the arteries. Then the arterial is the transit phase, in which the dye goes to the precapillary arterioles, capillaries, and the postcapillary venules. And here also, we can see the lamellar flow. The lamellar flow usually occurs because the slow-moving proteins which are bound with the fluorescein are sequestered on the sides. The central lumen is clear because the fast-moving plasma with the red blood cells is in the center. Also, the blood that is coming from the periphery is usually in the center. The venous phase has early, mid, and late phase, depending on the location of the dye. And this is the perifoveal capillary network, which is best seen at around 20-25 seconds post-injection. And this is called the peak phase of angiogram. Now, the late phase, the recirculation usually begins around 30 seconds after dye injection, and the retinal vessels are empty of fluorescein at roughly by the end of 10 to 15 minutes. And the optic disc remains hyperfluorescent in late films due to staining, and so does the Bruch's membrane and the sclera. This is the foveal avascular zone. This is the uh, uh, hypofluorescent zone. This is black or dark because of avascularity of the foveal avascular zone. There is presence of xanthophyll at the fovea, and there is also increased density of the RPE pigments here, and these RPE are even more pigmented. Also, the usual size is around 500 microns, and a good uniform FAZ indicates a healthy retina. And the complications can be like in form of extravasation, and patient can have nausea or vomiting. Then shock, syncope, and bronchospasm and anaphylaxis are usually the more dread ones. The basic terminologies are hyperfluorescence and hypofluorescence. Hyperfluorescence can be further divided as leak. Leakage is basically the hyperfluorescence increases in size and intensity both. It happens because of extravasation of dye in a potential space, like in an NVE or a CSC. Here we see a patient with central serous chorioretinopathy. This is early hyperfluorescence, which increases in size and intensity. So this is basically a leakage. In pooling, there is increase in intensity of hyperfluorescence, but not in size. So this is a patient where you can see the intensity has gone up, but the size is same. It usually happens in neurosensitive detachments and pigment epithelial detachments. Then the next one is staining, which basically indicates leakage of dye in a tissue, in a compact tissue. So the intensity goes up, but the size remains the same. Here, these things, what we see are these are basically drusen's. So the early there is less amount of hyperfluorescence, which is increasing in intensity, but the size is same. In this image, actually, in the center there is also a lesion that is early hyperfluorescence to increase in hyperfluorescence later on. The intensity and size both are increasing. So in this image is kind of a combination of staining as well as leakage. So this is a patient with drusen with CNVA. Now, window defect, there is a increase in intensity initially, then it plateaus and then it comes down again, but the size remains the same. So window defect usually happens because of loss of masking effect over the RPE and the retina, like in cases of geographical atrophy and angioid streak. Initial increase is because more dye is coming under the retinochoroidal circulation, and the reduction is because the dye is now washing out of the circulation. Then hypofluorescence can be of two types. Block fluorescence, like in retinochoroidal, here you can see that there are hypofluorescent spaces. This hypofluorescence is because there is an overlying substance, blood in this case, which is obscuring the underlying normal choroidal fluorescence. This is a choroidal block fluorescence. This is a case of PCV where the hemorrhage is subretinal. This subretinal hemorrhage is obscuring the normal fluorescence. Here you can see this is a hypofluorescence. This is the normal fluorescence. So this is hypofluorescent because the underlying choroidal fluorescence is being obscured. The other type is a vascular filling defect, another type of hypofluorescence. This is the vascular filling defect. This is the area of hypofluorescence that you are seeing. But if you correlate it with the clinical picture, there is no blood or anything on top. Hence, we can say that this is a choroidal non-perfusion, capillary non-perfusion area and not a block fluorescence. Now, how do we read FFA? These are the things that we need to note. Armed retina time, look for choroidal filling, arterial filling, arteriovenous transit time, venous filling, FAZ, and other significant findings. This is the normal arm to choroid time. Usually more than 20 is abnormal. Complete choroidal filling more than 5 is abnormal, and AV transit more than 15 is abnormal. Now, a few clinically significant cases. This is a patient with non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy. Here you see areas of hypofluorescence, which if you compare with the clinical photo, you can see there is blood here. So this is basically areas of block fluorescence. Then again, you can see some pinpoint areas of hyperfluorescence. These are the microaneurysms that are present. This is the FAS, as I had already explained. Here you can see that FAS is not uniform. There is some amount of distortion. There is mild distortion of FAS in this case. This is the area, if you see the microaneurysms were there, but the hyperfluorescence is increased in size and intensity, which is suggestive of leakage. Hence, there is some leakage at the fovea. So this is basically diabetic macular edema. Now here you can see again the FAS is distorted completely and it's also enlarged. Microaneurysms are present. This is the area where the laser has been done for PDR. So laser marks are usually hypofluorescent in between, and they have a hyperfluorescent edges. The hypofluorescence in the center is because of the destruction of the capillaries, and the hyperfluorescence at the edge is because of the clumping up of the RP causing staining. In this photo, you can see there are areas of capillary non-perfusion, and there is a abnormal vascular network that is connecting a vein to the artery, but it is not leaking. Okay, and so this network connecting a vein to the artery crossing a CNP area not leaking, it indicates towards the IRMA, that is intraretinal microvascular abnormality. Another picture we can see again blocked fluorescence here, and this is a arborizing network of vessel. If you see, there is it is crossing a major vessel. Also, in the late phase, there is increase in intensity and size. So that shows that there is some amount of leakage. So it basically indicates presence of a NV. Now, indications for FFA in diabetic retinopathy is documentation and confirmation of findings, unexplained poor vision, to rule out macular ischemia, then macular edema, whether there is diffuse or focal leakage. Then if there is a doubtful neovascularization, then patients with asymmetric diabetic retinopathy, patients with asteroid hyalosis, you have to differentiate between DME and Irvin gas. In Irvin gas syndrome, you'll have hot disc because of leakage from the disc because of the subclinical inflammation that will be associated with that. Now, this is a patient with HRVO or hemiretinal vein occlusion. You can see the hemorrhages here in the superior quadrant. Here, if you see closely, you can see the vein have started filling in the inferior quadrant, but in the superior quadrant, there is still hypofluorescence, both in supranasal as well as supratemporal. This shows that the superior hemisphere, the vein has obstructed. So this is a case of HRVO. Here, if you see, the hypofluorescence is being caused by the presence of blood here. So this is blocked fluorescence. Again, here there is an arborizing network increasing in size and intensity, the hyperfluorescence. So this is a neovascularization at disc. Here you can see CNP areas throughout. Then again, in this patient, actually, when he had come to us, we were not able to identify what was the cause for the edema at in the macula. So on doing angiography, we found out there was a area of hypofluorescence here, which showed a vascular filling defect. The FAZ was also distorted, and there were multiple small microorganisms here. So all this pointed towards presence of a macular PRVO. So indication in vein occlusion would be documentation, identification of subtle neovascularizations, classification like ischemic versus non-ischemic, perfuse versus non-perfuse BRVO, treatment of CNP, especially like targeted laser photocoagulation, where we only laser the areas of CNP. Rest areas we don't usually laser the normal retina. And also identification of macular vein occlusion, which is not visible clinically. Now coming to the choroidal neovascular membrane, it can be classic or occult. Classic is usually subretinal and occult is sub-RP. Occult can be fibrovascular pigment epithelium detachment or late leakage of undetermined source. Again, classic can be predominantly classic or minimally classic depending on the amount of classic component in it. And this is a classic CNVM because you can see in early phases, you can see a distinct lacy pattern with some amount of hyperfluorescence. This hyperfluorescence is increasing in size as well as intensity, suggestive of leakage. So leakage in a lesion which is macular with a lacy distinct pattern is suggestive of a classic CNVM. Now, these usually classic CNVMs leak more because they are present subretinally, so they have more potential space for the fluid to seep off. And also the classic CNVM being subretinal, they are visible much better because usually the sub RP lesions, they are hidden by the overlying pigmented RP. So now fibrovascular PED, as you know, is a sub RP lesion, and here we are not able to see any lacy pattern. Here we see stippled hyperfluorescence usually occurring around 1 to 2 minutes, along with this area of hyperfluorescent middle, which is present here also. So early to late, it is increasing in intensity but not in size. So this here is a PED. PED surrounded by area of stippled hyperfluorescence, no lacy or no network seen, and these are the drusens. So all these points indicates towards presence of a fibrovascular PED. Now, in this patient, you can see presence of stippled hyperfluorescence throughout. So early phase, it was the hyperfluorescence was minimal. It usually originates after 5 minutes, and there is stippled hyperfluorescence. No network was seen. and no particular PED. So we cannot say exactly from where the hyperfluorescence is coming out. So that's why it's named as a late leakage of undetermined source. Indications of FFA in CNV would be documentation, classification, and confirming the diagnosis. This is CSC. We had already discussed a pinpoint leak here, which is increasing in size and intensity. This is in plot pattern, and this is the smokestack pattern, which is much less common, around 10%, and it usually happens in patients with acute CSC. Here you see this smokestack appearance. This happens because of the differential osmotic gradient between the angiography dye and the subretinal fluid. So subretinal fluid, usually the protein settles down, hence the fluid is on top. So once the angiography dye diffuses, it goes towards the fluid, and then it spreads out. This is an example of a toxoplasma retinochoroiditis scar. Here you can see this classical headlight in fog, early hypofluorescence and late hyperfluorescence. These are classical for uvea cases. This early hypofluorescence is because of the focal choroiditis here. This is choroidal tuberculoma. Here again, you see early hypofluorescence with late hyperfluorescence. The hyperfluorescence you see here, it is actually increasing in intensity but not in size, because this is because of the window defect. But this is the lesion classically showing early hypo with late hyper. This is AMPI, that is acute posterior multifocal placoid epitheliopathy, placoid pigment epitheliopathy. That happens again, early hypofluorescence with late hyperfluorescence. The late hyper here is because of the disc leak, and here is because of the neurosensory detachment, because of pockets of fluid which are present there. A few tumors will go through. Retinal capillary hemangioma, early hyperfluorescence with increase in hyperfluorescence in the late phase. That can be because of the leakage as well as the staining of the tumor. FFA is done usually to find out small tumors which might be missed by clinical examination. In choroidal hemangioma, again, there will be early hyperfluorescence which will increase through the transit phase. Choroidal melanomas, you'll see the classical double circulation, the intrinsic tumor vascularity with the overlying retinal vascularity. This photo you can see it very clearly. This is the intrinsic vascularity with the overlying retinal vascularity. The take-home message would be all necessary precautions to be taken while performing FFA. Keep emergency drugs handy. Use imaging terminologies appropriate for easier understanding. Read the images in synchronized manner and always compare early and late frames. And always correlate the FFA findings clinically. Thank you so much. I hope this was useful for you.